911, what is the address of your emergency?
78. Help!
Aliens about 1 operator 6180. What's the address of your emergency? 1797 Sumter Street. We're being robbed at gunpoint.
No. They're following me to my house. The guns are already out. She's shooting. Okay.
Hello and welcome to Stop the Threat. My name is James Towle. On this week's episode, we take you to Chicago for a reenactment which we call Streetside Shooter. Thank you all for joining us, by the way. And before we get started, I just want to give you a footnote about today's panel. On today's panel, we have over 80 years of law enforcement experience. So the discussion should be very interesting today. I'm also going to start this by reading a quote by Alice Tripp, a lobbyist for the Texas State Rifle Association, an affiliate of the NRA, because it pertains very much to what's going to take place on today's show. When the community isn't involved or the family isn't involved, we look to lawmakers to fix our social and medical problems. And the only tools lawmakers have are to make laws. The politics of the gun is not going to fix mental health or social problems. What do you think about that, LT?
I found in my research over the years that some of them we can prevent, and they are being prevented, if the public and law enforcement combine and realize that these shooters naturally go through 5 phases. The fantasy stage where they dream about it, the planning stage where they're putting it down in writing who they're going to kill, the preparation stage where they make their efforts and combine the products of death. And then the approach where you might see a person who's dressed for combat walking towards a mall and give somebody a call. The last stage is the implementation, and we have learned that seconds mean lives. Someone has to stop them. Sometimes that's armed, sometimes that's unarmed. But I tell you what, when you're facing the muzzle of that gun and he starts asking you a question, you better move before he gets to the end of that sentence.
No, I think that's perfectly well said. Dianna, do you think there's any way for us to be prepared for a lone wolf killer?
Well, I think it was Thomas Jefferson that said that it's every citizen's duty to be armed and well-regulated or well-trained. And I wish that our society would embrace that again, because if everybody is prepared for that moment, then yes, you have, they're not going to have as much time to do as much damage if somebody is right there at the time that they start, as opposed to waiting for minutes, hours for somebody to get there with a gun to stop their crime.
Yeah, I think it's probably pretty safe. What do you think, Lieutenant?
Well,
do you think it's pretty safe that the more time that goes by after the threat has begun, the worse it's going to become? Is that a safe statement?
Absolutely. That's why agencies nationwide are training that the first officers on the scene now are not waiting for backup. They are immediately entering the zone and trying to find and engage the shooter. The other angle I was interested in from what Lieutenant Dan said was that, in every one of these most recent cases, someone close to the shooter had advanced knowledge that this was going to happen, either through social media or through the family. What's important for us is to figure out a way to get the stigma away from that people have to come forward and tell what they know about these people that are exhibiting these dangerous tendencies.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And also, we're referring to law enforcement arriving to take off your statement. But I am also going to say that you as a citizen, when you see this happen, it would be nice if there's some brave people out there who are going to come in really quick and move on this. Now, am I dreaming?
No, I'll tell you right now, there are events where they have been stopped by coaches.
So hold it right there, Dan. I just ran out of time. We're going to be right back. We'll pick up with Dan, and I'll show you part 1. Don't go away. Thanks for coming back, viewers. Just before we left, we were talking about lone wolf killers, and we can go on with that a little later because I want to show you part 1 of Streetside Shooter. Let's watch.
And here we are.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. I will be sure to rate you 5 stars.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Yeah, you too.
So anyways, we were at the club, right? And the music was really bad, and they really should have fired the DJ. And the music was really terrible. So my friend invented this dance.
Okay, I think we established early on there's probably nothing we can do to prevent these people. They're out there, they have mental conditions, and that's just the way the world is. If you're a well-trained civilian and you're armed, this would be a time to come forward. If you're law enforcement and you're close by, yeah, you might get there in time. What do you think?
Every person's worst nightmare. No advance warning, no nothing. The guy just comes out of the shadows and starts shooting. I don't know how you mount a defense against that. There's no way to get ahead of the curve on that type of situation.
Right. Diana?
And really, the best chance that they have is that for somebody in their group to be a concealed carry person. You know, they have to take care of themselves, and obviously this isn't just an argument. You know, they're going up directly against the lethal power of a gun, and if they don't have something to equal that, then they're at a disadvantage from the very beginning, and they're going to have to wait for somebody else to help.
Yeah. LT?
Fight or flight. That's the moment. You have to decide, am I going to fight this guy or flee, because the only other option is to die. And so, armed or not armed, you've got to make a decision. And if there was somebody with a gun, an honorable gunfighter, whether that's law enforcement or a citizen, that's what's needed to take that shot and make that shot.
Okay, so if we were going to give some advice to a group of people who find themselves in a position that they're being fired upon, what would we tell them?
Run.
Take cover.
Run, take cover, unless the muzzle is pointed at you and you're next.
Yeah.
And then movement, violence of action. You hit them hard, you hit them fast with technique, that's wonderful, and you hit them with multiple bodies. And try to separate them from that weapon, because as long as those bullets exist, he's not going to stop until he's out of ammunition or victims.
Right.
And if you're about to be a victim, don't go quietly into that good night.
I'm going to just say this, and I don't mean to be offensive to anyone out there, but I don't think everybody is going to run towards fire and try to stop it. So I think, personally, I think we would like to tell everyone out there, it's harder to hit a moving target, number one. We can agree upon that.
Yes, it is.
So if this breaks out and you're there, get moving, get away from and get cover. And I think that's probably the best advice. And I'm not even sure that advice, that I even need to say that.
You can also say that moving away, you are a stationary target getting smaller. So lateral movement, right.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Harder to hit.
Don't do the deer in the headlight things and just stand there, which is very common.
And I think that's probably going to happen
It's a very
too.
common
Freezing
reaction.
will
I
get you
think that's
killed.
gonna
Now, in
happen.
this case, it looks like the shooter was impaired. So that might be something that would work in your favor, the fact that he's not in full possession of his faculties, hopefully his aim is bad too.
Yeah, and it did appear, based upon our research, that he wasn't well trained. He didn't spend a lot of time at a range, and so he's waving that gun around. He's probably pretty high. In this particular instance, and this is only one of many, I think they had a fair chance of coming out of this alive. When we come back, we'll have more, and I'll show you part 2. Welcome back, viewers. Just to put this a little bit in perspective, let me just first say that lone wolf killers are not just in the United States. And we have a tendency to think that it's our problem and that it happens in our country. That is not true whatsoever. We have research, and I have a ton of it here, to indicate that this is taking place around the world. We're just not hearing about it. In fact, there's a rash of stabbings that is taking place, and I'm sure we're all going to hear about stabbings throughout the year now. But let me just go back to something that LT said. When do we respond, and how do we respond?
Well, it shows that the farther away you get from them, the more likely it is you're going to live. So give yourself distance if you have that opportunity. The only time an unarmed person would respond is when they're next, literally.
Right. Close
proximity, and they're asking you a question. I know what I would do is I would not let them finish that sentence. Right. I'm going to move and try to stop that threat. That's what you're going to do. And you can do that by stopping the shooter or the gun itself. Put a semi-automatic slightly out of battery and it's not going to fire.
Right.
It's absolute last resort.
Right. I don't think there's going to be a lot of people who are going to charge the gun, but you're right. If the gun is facing you, you only have one thing to do. And that's to try to prevent yourself from being killed or harmed, right?
You say a prayer and you say, God give me strength.
Yeah, God give me strength. I'm good with that. Yeah, I think we can all agree upon that. Let's watch part 2. It gets better.
Right? And the music was really bad, and I really should have fired the DJ. Were you a Monica? Yes. Okay. And I danced to go with it. And it's called the Hokey Pokey. Yes! So it's just like the regular Hokey Pokey, except I can't remember what I really should have.
Everyone okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, this is really big at this point, so I want to go back and I just want to ask and go around the table. Dianna, what would you have done different if you had been in the crowd?
Well, you saw a couple of them dive behind the car, and then there were a couple of the gals that just stayed out in the street for the remainder of the incident. So one of the things that you can tell yourself is that, program yourself to take cover and do something. And just because this threat is down doesn't mean that it's over. I've seen a video of an officer getting shot because he did not take cover after he engaged a bad guy. I think he may have mortally killed him, but then the guy returns fire and mortally kills the officer. So it's not over until it's way, way over. So continue to take steps in order to protect everybody.
Right. LT?
Well, I liked what the shooter did.
Absolutely.
He didn't warn the suspect. You didn't need to at that time because he's killing people. He acted immediately. He used his vehicle as best he could. He could have used it better in cover. He was a little high, but he used it for cover, and then he got on the phone right away. And if that ever happens and you have a gun in your hand, let the dispatcher know, I am armed, I am wearing, and I am the good guy.
Right.
But he was magnificent.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That is what you would hope to find. Now, this was an Uber driver.
Yes.
And I'm not sure of all the intricacies of the laws surrounding that, whether he can be armed or cannot be armed. And frankly, I don't care. He was armed at the right time, at the right moment, and he saved lives. And I think that's one of the things we certainly want to point out here,
Well,
Don?
I like to look at it from a different point of view, and that is those that might be harboring negative feelings towards that shooter. What would have happened if he had not been there?
Sure.
We'd be reading about it, and yet another senseless killing in the headlines of the local news.
And this happens every day.
Yes.
Good guys with good guns preventing people from dying. And that's what we don't get reported on. It's just the negative ones that get reported on, and these things exist. So I'm glad that we're telling
Well,
your
it's
viewers
not dog
that
bites man, it's when man bites dog that
Right.
it becomes a headline.
Well put. LT?
Well, it's funny, in a time when these shootings seem to be on a rise, some people are puzzled that citizens, good citizens, are hesitant to give up their guns. I mean, the fact is, this is a time when police are going to take minutes to get there, when seconds are going to mean the cost of lives.
Right.
And if there is a good citizen who's legally carrying and concealed,
And
that's
has trained.
and has the will and the skill
Right.
to, like this gentleman had,
Right.
I'd like to shake his hand when it's all over.
Right.
And it wasn't necessarily an easy shot, so he did have some level of skill. First of all, he's at 0 as far as adrenaline. All of a sudden, he's ramped up to 200 beats a minute and has to draw his firearm and fire multiple shots in the dark.
Right.
Looked like it was about maybe a good 7 to 10 yards away from one another. Right. That's not an easy shot to make, even for a trained police officer.
You know what? The research showed that he reacted quickly, that he did spend some time on the range. He knew what he was doing. It's everything you'd want in the individual you just described.
Yes.
Train, train, and train, because this can happen. It is happening more frequently, and you can change history. You can save a life, but spend some time on the range before you get out there and just start packing your weapon. When we come back, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more. Don't go away. Welcome back, viewers. Just before we end the show, though, I want to go back to LT because you started something and we didn't get a chance to really hear it all.
Well, you know, this would be polishing a diamond, because this was a diamond of a response. The only thing I could say to add to this is, as he's covering that suspect, ask the people who are injured to crawl towards my voice. Get them out of the line of fire. If you can move, come towards my voice. Other than that, everything he did was what you'd hope as a trainer, someone you'd trained, would do in those circumstances.
Okay, I need to have you explain that, because I can see right now that people are going to send me emails saying, what did he mean by crawl towards me? You're the defender, okay? You've got the gun, you're returning fire, and you're asking the innocents to come towards you. I'm confused.
Because they will not be able to see him because of the lighting. And they are now between him and the suspect. So if he does pick up that weapon, start shooting, they're still in danger. For him to go out there, he'd be putting himself in the line of fire. So can you move? If you can move, I'm here to help. Crawl towards my voice. Move towards my voice.
He has cover, and he's behind the car, so he's calling them to cover.
Okay,
Right.
so you would say that as opposed to go away.
I'm talking to the victims who are down there and wounded.
Right.
Or
Okay.
run away, whichever
Yeah.
is, that's a good point. Whichever is best, but they're still right there in the kill zone, and that guy, and you don't know if he's down.
Okay,
or
so
not.
we're going to assume that maybe one or two of them have been wounded, and you're really redressing them. Is that what you're saying?
I'm trying to get them out of that kill zone.
Okay.
And if they can move, it's best that they move themselves, and then you keep, like he was doing, keep covering that suspect, because if he gets up again, they're targets again.
Okay, so he's leaned over the hood. So let's just go with that a little bit. He's leaned over the hood and maybe a little more exposed than maybe we would like to be. And he's returned fire quickly and quite positively. Would he also come out from cover and move towards the shooter? Or would he remain in cover and
No.
maybe do a reload?
No, remain in cover.
Remain behind cover
Everything
is your
we
best
saw
bet.
was great. And the only thing I would have to add is if he were to re-engage him, to not pop up from the same point he did to engage him to begin with. And we learned that on force. You know, you put your head up at the same place twice and you get hit. So, you know, move to the back of the car and pop up there and engage him again. But they didn't have to on this one, but that's something to think about.
And I like the fact that he didn't continue shooting. After the immediate threat was down, he stopped shooting.
Okay, well, that's an interesting point.
It wasn't called for at that point.
That's an interesting point. Now, that's really a call by the guy who's doing the shooting.
Correct.
Okay, now I see him fall down on the ground. I now stop shooting.
Everyone okay?
That's what you're saying.
Exactly, because once the threat is no longer immediate, you're not justified in firing more shots at that individual.
So running around the car and popping more rounds into a body that's on the ground, not going to work out well for you in court.
Not good prosecutor.
And additionally, what they might want to consider is a tactical reload, so they're full,
that's what I
cover,
would say.
and then break up your tunnel vision to see if there's any other shooters. And when you turn and look around, now you've got your peripheral vision back.
point.
And then
that's
breathe.
really hard.
It is.
That's really hard, by the way, because you tunnel in and you're, you know, running off rounds. Now, and you're right, I'm not disagreeing with you, but it's difficult to come out of that and now check left and right and make sure everything's okay.
It's a huge part of your training to incorporate, you know, to the scan.
Okay, well, the key word there was training, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
And then we're going to go back to that one more time, go down to the range, join a gun club, get out there and do the IDPA. If you want to be someone who's going to be helpful, be trained and be ready. Again, we could go on forever. I'll see you again next week. Be safe, be trained, be alert.